I'm Sunny.
I'm Randy, and this is Bourbon, Wine, and True Crime, a podcast where three gentle but surprisingly aggressive friends sit down once a week to drink together virtually and discuss true crime. However, it is spooky season, and we will be discussing spooky stories this month.
Ooh.
Hello, ladies.
I'm so excited. It's the best time of the year. I can't wait.
Yeah, although the fact that y'all like fully decked out your houses before we hit September, and then I'm sort of like, I have a blow up skeleton unicorn. I feel like there's some small differences here. I don't know.
I went hard in August. I was like, you know what? I saw a leaf turn yellow last year, but it's fine. So we're decorating.
That seems fair. That seems reasonable. I like it.
I feel like it's Labor Day weekend. You know, we're away from the July stuff. We're done with back to the school. Like, it's time to hit it hard for Halloween. It's time.
See, like my plan for being spooky was just to scream at people as they walked past my house, out of anxiety and horror. And I'm just like,
that's scary. That's not spooky. That's scary.
I thought we did that last Tuesday.
Is it normal if I do that in, May and June and July as well? All the months, really. Just screaming out the window. Shrieking.
Please help me. Are you hostage? No, my kid's here.
Blink twice.
So, Randy, what are we getting into today?
Oh, we are getting into the Black-Eyed Kids. Guys, what's up, AJ?
I know so little about this. I'm really excited.
Oh. I feel like I live with one. I don't know anything about it, but I feel like there's one in my house.
Guys, I downloaded a book. I was watching documentaries. I was reading articles. I was in it. I am in the Black-Eyed Kids, and I'm so stoked for this because I thought it was just going to be a little plug and we were all going to share stories, but I'm at 12 pages of notes. So we'll see. Fair. I'm gonna try not to read quickly because the Philly in me comes out.
That has to be the most that you have researched and or interacted with children, just in general, in ever, probably.
Yeah, I feel bad I don't think I'm gonna do trick or treating this year because I'm terrified of children, more so than usual right now.
I am currently trying to convince my little one to do Chucky again, so I can like throw back to Bride of Chucky, and he said no.
Oh, that'd be awesome.
I don't know. He said that we have to go and look at costumes together. And I was like,
he doesn't want to be, what was it, like a pirate shark?
Oh, yeah. He was pirate shark and I was pirate octopus one year. So that's a thing.
That's nowhere.
A thing.
That's cool. Mm-hmm. I like that.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
Animorphs. I dig it.
Oh, I remember. I love those books.
So we go to this used bookstore pretty frequently called Copper Cat Books because it's full of cats. So I can't be in there for very long. But the woman who owns it is amazing, and she has some sort of catacombs, I call them the catacombs, like full of all these books that she special orders. She has the entire Animorph series available.
I need all of that.
Yeah. So I just got him all of the Sideways stories from Wayside School. You remember those back in the day? Yeah.
I think that was a little after me. I don't know. I don't remember that.
Oh, that was like maybe very early 90s.
I don't remember. Say it again. West.
It was. You're like West Side Story.
West. Standing by the cooler.
She's like, that's what we were doing in high school. Just oomba, doo wop.
Are you going to the B building?
Sideways stories from Wayside School.
I remember the title.
From. Sideways stories from.
No.
I don't know where I got West from. Anyway, I digress. Sorry.
But I am very excited to hear about Black-Eyed Kids and Have Nightmares this evening. Yeah.
So let's get to it. All right. So the Black-Eyed Kids or Black-Eyed Children is an urban legend that blew up in 1996 or 1998, depending on the source, with a story by journalist Brian Bethel. According to Brian, he was out one night paying his internet bill, as one did in the 90s, with a physical check. So where the drop boxes, I was poor, so I always had the AOL free CDs. So I never paid for internet until I was like already paying my own bills. But so where the Dropbox was located was right next to a movie theater, which will be important in just a second. So he's writing the check to put in the Dropbox to pay his bill when he hears a knock at his window, and he sees that it's two boys aged about 9 to 12. One he describes as having olive skin and curly hair, and the other with pale skin and red hair. They're kids, but it's late, so he rolls down his window just enough to hear what they're saying. The boys explain that they were there to see the Mortal Kombat movie, not the new one, the old one, but they'd forgotten their money at home, and they couldn't walk home and get it because then they missed the beginning of the movie, so they wanted Brian to give them a ride home and then bring them back to the theater. The problem with this is that Mortal Kombat had already been playing for over an hour. So you guys remember the old school marquees where it'd have the title of the movie and then the start time?
Yeah.
So we can clearly see that the movie's been playing for quite a while.
So just for clarification, he's at the theater and these are two boys that he doesn't know. And like he's sitting in his car, like at a Dropbox, and the Dropbox is near the theater.
Correct.
Okay.
And he's just sitting in the dark writing the checkout.
These kids are ballsy. I mean,
that's kind of where I'm at in my
to be
brain.
fair,
like,
it was the mid-90s. Anything goes.
It was
right.
Yeah, it was a different time. That's kind of where I was thinking in my mind. I was like, geez, like, okay, all right. They asked some rando, like, hey, yo, take us home so we can get our money and come back. Well, you're going to take us home and then bring us back. Okay.
A random older man.
Yeah.
So it gets weirder. The kids are saying,
first of all, if any man is writing a check in front of you, you just need to go the other direction because you don't want any of that person.
Well, this is also the 90s when checks were still a thing. This is like 20, almost 30 years ago at this point. Oh, I didn't mean to say that. I feel old.
Thanks, I hate it.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks, hate it. So the kids are saying things like, just let us in. We won't hurt you. And we're just two little kids. We don't have a gun or anything.
Nope.
So this conversation is going on. Brian is kind of internally freaking out. He is so paranoid. He's experiencing this irrational fear that he can't explain, but it's just completely consuming him. And he has no intention of letting these kids into his car. However, he looks down and he realizes his hand is reaching for the car handle. So he looks down at his hand. He's like, don't do that hand. And he looks up and the boys are looking at him and he sees that their eyes are completely black. At this point, he makes a quick excuse and he nopes the fuck out of there. And this is, again, it's pretty late. And so the parking lot is pretty empty, if not completely. But as he's driving away, he looks in his rearview mirror and the kids are gone.
I would Sesame Street Martian out of there so fast. Nope. Nope.
Now, kind of a weird fun fact is this happened in Abilene, Texas, which is super close to the 33rd parallel, which we'll have to cover at some point, but a bunch of really weird coincidences happen along the 33rd parallel, like the assassination of JFK, the assassination of his brother, the other Kennedy. So this happened in Abilene, Texas, which is super close to the 33rd parallel, and it has a ton of spooky shit, weird coincidences associated with it. We might get into it later on, not this episode. So Brian posts a story online and he also writes an article about it and it blows up. Suddenly all these people are talking about their encounters with these creepy fucking kids.
Is it like the same two or just children with black eyes?
Children, adults, young adults, like it's, and a lot of times the story with Brian Patel, it's credited as the first black-eyed kids story, but it's not. It's just he posted his, it like when the internet was getting really big and it reached so many people, and then all these people like, oh, I had an encounter in the 70s. I had an encounter. It's so creepy. We'll get into specifics.
Well, that makes sense. I mean, if he's like right here is like the dawn of the internet, and now it's going to reach a greater span of people. So,
well, and he's a journalist.
Do you guys remember when I covered Meat Rain?
Yes, I remember that.
I forgot about that.
I actively forgot about it until you brought it up.
I forcefully forgot about it.
Yeah, well, you know, enjoy the weather.
You're welcome.
Splat.
So for part of my research, I listened to an old episode of That One Time I Was Abducted by Aliens, and they were discussing a book written by David Weatherly titled Black-Eyed Children. But before you go out and buy it, there are a ton of stories by people that have read that book in particular, because he has a bunch of books about various paranormal mysteries like cryptids and werewolves and shit like that. If you read that book, you're opening yourself up to some shit. People have said that they've had their own encounters with black-eyed children after reading it, or things have gotten so strange in their lives that they stopped reading it and returned the book. So I'm not going to be buying
like the freaking Ring VHS at this point.
What was the book
no
called
thanks.
Again?
It is called Black-Eyed Children by David Weatherly.
Nope.
Nope. See, I was going to, because I'll buy shit like whenever the podcast, like I read this book and I was coming to buy it, and they're like, actually don't. I was like, you know what, you're right. So
Black-Eyed Children. Okay,
David Weatherly. And of course, all the sources are posted in the show notes, because I'll talk about the book that I did read that was really good. But before I get into the black-eyed kids or black-eyed children encounters, I want to talk about how they usually happen, because they tend to follow a similar pattern. So there you are, late at night, you hear a knocking at your door. It could be your front door or your back door, because the back door is somehow so much worse.
The back door is way off limits, Randy. I think we've discussed
it. We don't go shopping in that special aisle. Okay?
That aisle is closed for maintenance.
It is always
permanently closed. So there is always a caution sign and do not enter.
Nope.
So here's the weird thing about the knocking, and I hope you can hear this on tape. So usually whenever somebody knocks at your door, right, it's... But the way people report this knocking is it's... And it just keeps going until you answer the door. Which, again, is just way worse for me. Hate it.
That was creepy.
So now I'm exclusively, when I go to your house.
Girl, I got cameras everywhere. Let's go.
You just gave her a new thing.
Oh my God, I hate it. All right, so you open the door because, sure, there is one or more, but usually two, kids or young people on your doorstep. You don't know why, but you are suddenly absolutely terrified. You break out into a cold sweat and your heart is pounding, and all you want to do is slam the door and run and hide. But you can't move, and instead you stand there calmly with your door open to the night air. The kids aren't aggressive or intimidating, but calm. Too calm. There are a lot of the stories that put the kids in clothes that are either not appropriate for the weather conditions or for the time, with clothes being decades or centuries out of date. They keep their eyes lowered or covered as they quietly insist that you let them into your house to use the phone or get something to eat, or wait for their parents to pick them up, or use the bathroom. And mind you, a lot of these stories happen at between 2 and 4 a.m. Usually people are asking questions about why kids are out alone so late. And as the questions continue, this is usually when the kids will raise their eyes or uncover them, or in some way reveal that their eyes are completely black. Brian Bethel described their eyes as the sort of eyes one sees these days on aliens or bargain basement vampires on late night television. Soulless orbs like two great swaths of a starless night. Usually this breaks the hypnosis, and the person quickly slams the door or vacates the area, because sometimes they'll approach cars. There have been stories of black-eyed people who seem to hang back and wait for the kids to gain entry. Nah, bruh.
Okay, question. Are there any reports of like deaths or injuries or anything following an encounter with black-eyed kids?
Oh, my dude, we will get there.
Great.
Awesome.
Really stoked about that. I was like, oh no, weird and creepy. That's as long as there's gonna be more. But wait, there's more.
But wait, there's more.
My front door and back door were equally terrifying because they were both like 10-story glass French doors, front and back. Like you saw the front, you saw the back. Like I would just like make a beeline for it across the house, regardless of like what door it was coming from. Either way, it was fucking scary. So this is not helping. Yeah.
So I read The Chilling True Terror of the Black-Eyed Kids, a monster compilation by G. Michael Vasey. It was so good. I highly recommend checking it out if you want to get more into this. This is where, so what G. Michael Vasey did is he rewrote this book a couple times. he put a kind of like a call for stories on this website called My Haunted Life 2. And he wrote the book, I think, in the late 90s. And then he rewrote it again, and then he rewrote it again, which is as more stories came in. But it is like packed full of just stories about this shit. So I have a couple here. But it's only about 100 pages, but it's all these stories about these encounters with these things. And I have just a few of my favorites.
Yay.
Buckle up, Buttercup. So this is taken straight from the book, which is obviously in the show notes if you want to reference it. So this incident happened to me about 5 years ago. It was in December or January, and we were having particularly strong snowstorms at the time. I'd been in bed for a few hours when I started to hear tapping noises coming from several windows in my house. It must have been around 3 a.m. I just thought it was some neighborhood kids making asses of themselves. So I got up, went downstairs, and opened the door. 2 boys were standing there. Now remember, this is the middle of winter, and these 2 boys are standing there in their thin jackets and pants. The cold didn't seem to bother them one bit. I also started to feel very anxious, scared even. I couldn't explain it at the time. The smaller of the boys suddenly started talking. He had a monotone voice with absolutely no emotion of any kind. He asked if he could use the telegraph. Now I was expecting them to want to use the phone or perhaps the bathroom, but the telegraph? At the same time, I noticed the whole neighborhood had become deathly quiet. No dogs barking, no humming of wires, no cars, nothing. I told the 2 boys that I didn't have a telegraph in my house and asked them to go home and reconsider their lives. I also explained that playing fool and asking for a telegraph was a dumb thing to be doing at such an early hour with a grumpy old man like myself. They didn't even flinch. I closed the door and the tapping on the window started again. I felt drained. That's when they started screaming and shouting for me to let them in. I grabbed the phone in my hall and dialed for the police. The screams and shouts should have been audible over the phone, but the lady that took my call didn't seem to hear them. She said that they would send a patrol car. Later, I was told that she hadn't taken my call seriously and no patrol car had been dispatched. Thanks.
Great.
Yeah,
great.
You can't hear what's going on, so I'm not going to get murdered. Cool.
Seems fine. Seems great.
I went back upstairs as the tapping and banging continued. I eventually fell asleep and I haven't seen those kids since. But I do want to know what the hell was going on. I haven't been able to get the whole thing out of my mind. What did they want with the telegraph?
No.
See, if it were 2 little girls and they needed the telegraph, these 2 are aspiring actresses. They're like, I need a telegraph. You know, they're just being goofy. But for 2 little boys, are they always boys or are they ever classified as girls?
There's a couple girls, and actually one of the stories that I have, the girl is significantly worse.
I'm just imagining the little girls being like, because my brain is equating it with Children of the Corn. So these dead-eyed little blonde girls just being like, hello, or like the twins from The Shining, just come play with us, and also let us use your telegraph. And I don't know why that was their accent. Don't know what accent that was.
Have you seen?
Well, mine were old British girls, so I don't know.
Yeah. Have you seen In the Mouth of Madness?
Mm-mm.
Oh, it is a cult classic. Yeah, I'm gonna send it to you guys so you remember to watch it for spooky season. But they had this one part where the kids are just off, and it's this little blonde girl, and she's like, "Do you know what today is?" And the woman's like, "No," and she's like, "It's Mommy's Day." And it's just so creepy.
I wonder if all little British girls are creepy, or just it's
a trope.
It's a trope. I don't have any to compare it to, so I'm just going with all of them are creepy until proven otherwise.
I mean, everything that I've been exposed to. Yeah, the SpongeBob meme. I'm gonna head out.
I'm gonna head out.
All right, so this next story is a good example of how nowhere is safe.
Great.
Mm-hmm.
Love it.
I'm in the United States Air Force and I live on base. I had never encountered anything strange on base until this incident happened.
I was thinking, no, you're not. You're in the Army.
I'm doing imaginary bunny ears at the start of your story. I was on base one weekend. Almost everyone else was home, drinking, sleeping, or on duty. I'd only stayed that weekend because I'd spent all my money, which, like, I feel that I've been there. I'm poor. Luckily, the Army provides housing and food for me, but not alcohol, unfortunately.
Boo.
I was on my bunk watching a movie when I heard a knock at my door. So I don't know how Air Force barracks are set up, but I know with the Army, for somebody to get to your door, they usually have to walk past. Like there's a desk where people just sit there and monitor traffic.
I think it's set up similarly.
Yeah, there's always like a check-in monitoring station.
And there's ways to go around it because
show your ID to Nurse Ratched. Yes, sir.
Oh, classic book and movie. But there's ways around it. But they're not like you have to live in that building to know what the back ways are. All right, so I was on my bunk watching a movie when I heard a knock at my door. I thought it was my roommate. I went and opened it. Instead of a roommate, I found 2 kids standing on the walkway. Only these kids freaked the hell out of me. I don't know what it was about them, but I've always been told to listen to what's inside because it just might save your life. Right then, that voice was screaming at me to shut the door and lock those kids out. There's also the little telltale sign that these kids had pitch black eyes. I mean, there's absolutely no white or any other color to them, just pure black. I asked them what they were doing here at this time of night. One of them told me that it was cold out and they wanted to come in to read. I had never met a kid that wanted to come in and read, and I knew for a fact that they didn't belong on base, which this goes back to it's like they don't quite understand the nuances
But that's the thing is I was just like, this is very, very poorly constructed. I would like to round them up and be like, listen here, all right? We're going to learn some sales techniques, everyone. All right? We're going to learn some persuasion, telegraph, and coming in to read. Nah.
Oh, it gets...
Like, I have a sweet meme to show you that is going to gain you entry immediately. All right.
I got some crypto coin.
Get a little crypto coin.
I knew for a fact that they didn't belong on
All
base.
you have to say is, I'm selling Girl Scout cookies. Come on in. Like, if you just said so that, black
you got
guys
any
or
Samoas?
Not, I'd be like, Samoas and Thin Mints, bitches. Let's go.
Full send. They're all the way in my house.
No, that's worse.
You sold to the demons.
2 little Girl Scouts show up with like completely pitch black eyes, and you're like, I'm still gonna let them in, but
still gonna let them in. Do you have the cookies with you?
Yes. Show me.
Come on in. Show me the cookies.
Come on.
Oh, you said there's a 5% discount? Let's go.
If I sell you my soul, I don't have to pay. Awesome.
I gotta pay next season. That's fine. We're good.
That's fine. I got 12 months. Cool. Let's go.
So I knew for a fact that they didn't belong on base. They didn't mention any parents, any broken down cars, or even how they managed to get on base. There was nothing sincere about these kids. They were playing a game. It was at this point that I noticed I could not drag my eyes away from theirs. I felt like I was being sucked in. It felt horrendous, as though my life were being dragged from my body screaming. They just stood there with their mouth closed, eyes staring into mine with no emotion at all. I prayed for someone else to come by, but nobody did. I glanced around, the kids stepped forward, and I stepped back, and I slammed the door shut. I felt as though I was in grave danger. Every warning bell was going off in my head. I stepped back and fell on my bunk, drained of energy. I heard soft knocking against the door for a few minutes, shuffling feet, and then nothing. The next morning, I went down and asked one of the officers on duty if he had seen the kids. He hadn't. Reading the accounts on your site, I believe I came face to face with these kids on a military base. How did they get in? I have no idea. Where did they go? I have no idea. But if they get into a military campus, they can get anywhere. So remember that Mr. Vasey, he's the one that's like compiling these cases or these stories. Yeah. That's why it's like, oh, I like read your site, not our site, but his site.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. How do they get on base? I have many questions.
I hate it.
All right, Sunny, this is a shout out to you.
Oh, good.
This next story shows that the black-eyed kids don't quite get what humans do and how we act. So
is this okay? Is this some sort of dig at me? Look, I'm trying to figure people out. All right, you guys are difficult. It's hard.
Girl, it's literally takes place in Vegas. Hush.
Yay.
See, I slapped my microphone. Bah.
I had to let that down. Okay.
Oh, you so blonde.
It was like giving me a little headache up here.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So this incident took place about 7 or 8 years ago. I've been reading many of the accounts on your website, and I wanted to share my story. It was a little different to the average account I've read and may be useful for someone. I just moved to Las Vegas with my wife of 20 years. Hey, yo. We were small town folks in the Midwest. We moved cross country. Being naive and new to city living, I habitually answered the door without a second thought. I had never even heard of a black-eyed kid before this incident. The first thing
never answer your door. No. Ever. You don't answer even if you order food, you don't answer the door.
Here's the thing: is in Vegas, it's either going to be black-eyed kids or people selling you solar. It's one or the other. There's no other options.
You know you didn't order either one.
Nope. So don't want either one. No thanks.
Don't want either one. Don't answer your door. You ordered the food, drop it off, and
go. Are you DoorDash? Did you bring Blaze Pizza? No. Goodbye.
No, not answering the door.
Even if you are DoorDash, leave it at the step, and we'll come out at different times.
Solar people.
We don't answer the door. Anyway, yeah, nope.
The first thing that should have tipped me off to the strangeness of this situation was the fact that someone was knocking on my door at 4:30 a.m. No, sir. No. The second thing that should have dawned on me is this kid had to reach over a rather tall patio gate to unlatch and open it, which I tried to do later and couldn't manage. I'm not sure how he got into my yard. The knock at the door was startling. My wife and I were getting ready for work, a normal routine. The moment I opened the door, I was overtaken with an inexplicable sense of fear. Literally, I went from being relaxed to shaking like a leaf. To this day, I can picture him. The teenager, around 5 feet, average build, knee-length black leather coat, short black hair and sunglasses, eating an apple, standing on the other side of my door. Who eats fruit at 4:30 in the morning?
I mean,
what teenager eats fruit?
Okay, fair.
I mean, lettuce at midnight sounds delightful, but apples at 4 a.m. sounds just very bizarre.
No, that's ridiculous. He was very polite and asked if he could come in to warm up. I said no, closed the door, and I slid the security chain into place. A moment later, another knock. I opened the now chain door, and before I could speak, he asked again if he could come in and warm up. I said no again and attempted to close the door. Before the door could shut, he put his hand out, stopping the door on its hinges. He looked directly into my eyes, still wearing his sunglasses, and said, "Can I at least get some ketchup for my apple?"
I mean, if he asked for peanut butter for his pickle, that would make a lot more sense. But ketchup for an apple just sounds...
I kind of want to try to see if that's a thing. Maybe he's raised in like a Mennonite household where it's very secluded.
Challenge accepted. Guess what you're eating next podcast? I'll eat peanut butter.
Can we do a food challenge?
We're going to do a food challenge because guess what Randy's eating?
Okay, we can do a food challenge within reason. This is not Fear Factor.
But it's spooky season. It's part of your story. So you have to eat apples and ketchup.
I'll do apples with ketchup, but I'm not doing like pig intestines.
Ew, no.
Okay, good. As long as we're not getting super weird.
No.
That was totally normal. What are you talking about?
Before everybody adds me, I've smelled... Oh God, what's pig intestines called?
Tripe?
Chitlins.
Tripe.
No, that's pig stomach. Chitlins. And they smell terrible and I will never eat them. So thank you. Thanks for coming to my TED Talk. So he goes...
Sorry,
No, we can do... I have to come up with my own. Now.
Okay, so then I need a food challenge. No, I'm doing the pickles and peanut butter.
I'm doing ketchup and apples.
Y'all got to give me something weird, and that's gonna be a hard
challenge.
A hard challenge to me.
We can do this. We got this.
I believe in us.
I do too. We got it.
So not a chance, I replied. My wife is currently calling the police. He smiled and said, "No, you won't be calling anybody." At that moment, I pushed the door closed, locked it, and called out to my wife. She thought I'd been talking to myself. She didn't even hear him talk. I pulled the curtains back to look out the window next to the door, and he wasn't there. There was no trace of him. I got to the patio.
Are they like vampires? Can they not come in unless invited? This is just...
That's one of the theories, is that they're vampires or demons, and they have to be invited in. Because they won't come in unless they're invited. And they're not always around at night, but there's some... I didn't include it here. Go read the book. It's really good. There are some stories with them doing shit in broad daylight. Creepy. I go out on the patio and I check the gate, but it's still latched from the inside. My wife didn't believe me until that evening when she returned home and saw a half-eaten apple on the step outside of our house. That's the freakiest bit. That damn half-eaten apple hadn't been there when I checked the yard, yet a few hours later, it was sitting on my step, waiting for us to return.
That's creepy.
Well, because I'm picturing the gate that he has, and I think it's one of those, you know how it's like the one you have to manually unlock, and you can reach over and get it, but sometimes they're in the middle of the gate, and you can't, like, you have to unlatch it from the inside.
Yes.
And he's saying that this was latched, like, before the dude came in and after he left, but it's like, how did you, or maybe one of the slide bolts? Yeah. Because I'm assuming this dude's 5 foot is pretty short.
Yeah.
Unless he has some sort of hook. Like,
like a crowbar. You could do a crowbar.
Yeah, like you could.
Yeah. But would you bother to relatch it?
Depends.
How creepy are we trying to be?
I mean, yeah. Let's go. Let's do it.
So, on top of being creepy as fuck, this next story shows that they also may be able to see into the future. I was on a date with my fiance, who is now my husband, one night in 1985. I was a year-old. 4.
So didn't exist. I was a twinkle in my father's eye at that point.
Or his testicles.
A twinkle in my father's testicles just rolls off the tongue. Thank you for that.
Oh, that's a
You're
mental
welcome,
image.
biology.
Yes.
This took place in New York City. Both my husband and I are lifelong New Yorkers. My husband is an accountant and I'm a retired teacher. We were going out to dinner and had just pulled over near a restaurant that we used to frequent a lot. As my husband parked the car outside the restaurant, we both heard someone knock their knuckles against the window, which is unusual, as there is normally a doorman at this restaurant to dissuade this sort of thing.
Another card counter.
We both looked over and saw 2 teenage boys in hoods standing outside of our car. I immediately felt like I've never felt before. My hands were shaking without any reason to shake. I was instantly petrified. The boys were pale, from what I could see, and looked completely stoned. My immediate reaction was to leave, but my husband didn't want to leave without dinner, which, like, same.
Yeah.
Can relate. That's fair.
Feed me. My husband opened the car door and the 2 boys stood back to let him out. He was just going to ignore them and go into the restaurant. I opened the door on my side and got out too. When I turned around and looked at the boys, and in the dim street light, they looked as though they just had black pools where their eyes should be. Just 2 large patches of black, no other color at all. "We need a ride in your car," one of them said to my husband. Mike, my husband, had turned his back to them to lock the car door. He hadn't seen their eyes. "Well," he replied, "you're SOL." "It won't take long," the boy said, as though he didn't hear my husband's response. "We're just young people who need a ride." That was so weird. Since when did teenagers call themselves young people? It was like 2 old men had
Hello,
jumped
fellow young folks.
Hello, fellow youths. Since when did teenagers call themselves young people? It was like 2 old men had jumped into these teenage bodies. "Well, shit," my husband said at this time. He's a real New Yorker. "You better take the subway." As my husband Mike turned, the boys started screaming. "Invite us into your car. We can't enter unless you invite us." My husband was about to yell back when he saw their eyes. His face completely fell. I have never seen him so shocked by something. He sidestepped away from them and moved onto the sidewalk. I moved to the back of our car. We both watched as these 2 boys suddenly started screaming and shouting. The 2 boys backed up, still screaming and shouting. "You need to let us in," one of them screamed, pointing at us. "We have to see our friend." We turned around and headed into the restaurant. The doorman was standing inside the lobby. He hadn't seen or heard the boys. We had dinner, and I thought that would be the end of it. I remember feeling terrified for days after. I didn't sleep very well, and I had a lot of nightmares. I had a lot of headaches, too. A week later, I was starting to dread going to bed, as I would see these boys every single time I opened my eyes. I was worried they would visit us again or would appear in our bedroom. I was scared to leave the house, and I felt violated, as though they had attacked me. Yet all they had done was nothing compared to what others had gone through. They didn't do much except scream, shout, and act weird. It was just what happened to me afterwards that bothered me. I really think that once you get caught up with these kids, they have a long-lasting effect on you. Nightmares, panic attacks, sleepwalking, headaches, fear of seeing them again. A few months later, things were starting to calm down. I asked my husband if he remembered the incident. He said he did, and he'd met up with them again. Which, like, casual?
What? He's like, oh my God, we met for coffee at Starbucks. It was great.
It was dope.
You forgot to say that, sir? Like yesterday?
You forgot to mention that you met up. What do you mean
we
you
did
met up with
trivia
them?
night at the brewery. It was super fun.
They're really good at horror.
They murdered everyone, so we won by default. It was great.
So apparently they were outside his office one afternoon waiting by his car. They did the same thing they did outside the restaurant. When my husband told them he was calling the police from his office, the kids didn't seem to care one way or the other. The creepiest thing was that they told him they wanted to go to an address to visit their friend who could help them out. The address at the time didn't mean anything. It was just a suburb of New Jersey. Years later, we were moving to a new house, and when my husband saw the address of the house I wanted to see, he went white. It was the same address these boys had told him about outside of his office. What are these kids? What do they want? Some say they're demons, others say they're lost spirits. I have no idea what they are, but they terrified the hell out of me.
Okay. To be fair. No, hold on. All that story told me were that they were freshmen. Two weird boys in hoodies that are pale white that haven't seen the light of day. They're stoned, and they're asking like weird, irrelevant questions that have nothing to do with anything around you that you're doing in that moment. But that's what they want to ask you, and that's where they want to go. All this story says to me is there's a teacher in there that's pissed off. That's like, no, motherfucker, go figure it out on your own. I'm not dealing with you today. I've already dealt with you 5 days this week.
Google it. Use the telegraph.
Okay.
I think what freaks me out is that
all that story were freshmen. That's it.
But like the same kids found this couple outside of a restaurant and then found the dude's work and then guessed because this isn't, you're not talking about Kansas, this is New York City. And what's the chances of finding
what year is this for this particular story?
I don't think it's
we were merely freshmen.
I know the first book was written
because all
finished.
I see are 14-year-old boys, and all of that fits perfectly.
I think most of this is like early to mid 2000s, like prior to 2015.
Yep. So like emo goth.
But how'd they find them again?
I don't know, but this is my waking nightmare, our freshman boys.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, same.
I mean, I didn't enjoy them when I was a freshman, and I don't enjoy them now. So yes.
Now the end part, like the address, I can't explain that away. The rest of it to me just screams high school freshman boy.
Screams freshman. Okay.
All right. So AJ was asking about if there are black-eyed little girls.
Yes, I'm very curious.
This story is just for you. I heard you talking to me when I was researching. So this story has a wild twist. So again, this is me reading somebody else's story. So this account.
Okay, real quick. It's the Bader-Meinhof phenomenon or frequency bias. Okay, we're good.
Okay. I'm writing that down because that's going to come up later. Say it again. Frequency bias.
It's Bader-Meinhof phenomenon, aka frequency bias.
And that's when you know about something, so you see it more.
Yeah, just here to be weird and ruin everything with
Sunny.
That's your superpower.
Everything.
That is your legitimate superpower. Okay.
I'm so sorry. Okay,
Starbird, go ahead.
Black, yep, black guys,
black
girls,
kids, children,
okay.
or white-eyed children.
What?
This account of the black-eyed kids is a little unusual because they're all super normal. My experience took place several months ago in Kansas. I had been reading the other accounts on your site, and I wanted to share my story here. Looking back, the most bizarre thing about my experience was how quickly they showed up. I walked in the porch, turned around to lock it, then turned back, and there was a knock. More than anything else in the story that freaks me out, it's not something I've seen in the other accounts that I've read. I turned around and saw them. 2 kids. One was in his early teens, the other looked around 11. The older one was knocking. He looked panicked and was really pounding on the door. The younger one looked emotionless and didn't say anything. "We have to use your phone." I felt my hand moving forward towards the doorknob, but then I yanked it back. I don't know if I need to explain that I wanted to help them, but also felt afraid of them, but I did. It's in all these encounters, so I'm just confirming that yes, it happened to me too. These kids absolutely strike fear into your heart. It always seems strange to me that no one who's ever encountered black-eyed kids before has ever heard of them. I had at least read a few paranormal websites, and I knew a few of the stories people had told. I think that's why it was a reflex when I heard a request to use the phone. My eyes went to theirs, and I saw that they were solid black. I knew what these kids were. The older kids seemed to immediately realize what I'd seen. I've heard that they usually get mad if you see their eyes. That didn't happen this time, though. His eyes got a look of desperation. "I swear to God, I won't hurt you," he screamed. "You can trust us." That's something I've never seen reported before. I ran to get my shotgun. Same. I wasn't going to just stand there and listen to them begging to get in for the next hour. When I came back with the gun, though, they were already gone. In their place was a young girl. Her hair was very light. I remember it as white. She wasn't trying to get in. In fact, she was looking away. I pointed the gun at her anyway. Which, like, also same.
I think it would be like aggressively waving like a fork, but like I'd be like, "Look here,
nope, I'm coming,
young lady.
I'm coming blazing with a shotgun. I need you to leave. You get the hell out of here." "You don't need to do that," she said. "I don't even want to get in." I lowered my gun involuntarily. This girl freaked me out far more than the boys did, but I was powerless to disobey her. She had power. "There were some boys who came by and asked to come into your house. Is that correct?" "Yes," I said, hoping that being honest with her would get her to go away as soon as possible. "How long ago did they leave?" "Just now. I was going to get my gun for them, and when I came back, you were here." "Excellent. Then they should still be close. Don't worry, you won't be seeing them again." She turned to me briefly, and I caught a glimpse of her face. I looked at the eyes, expecting them to be black again. Instead, I saw they were pure white. No irises and no pupils, just pure white pools in her face, which seemed to glow slightly in the darkness. She turned and walked away, and I realized something. I believed her. I fully expected that I would never see those boys again. So, do you guys want to hear stories about when people let them in?
Yes.
Are you ready?
Tell me. Yes.
I am white person lipping you as we're passing in the hallway. That's what I'm doing right now.
So,
greetings.
So of course, all this will be posted in the show notes. One of these stories is from Week in Weird, and then one is from the book that I referenced earlier. So we'll do the book one first. Let me bump this over. This took place in Arizona in the mid-1980s. So this is before the story that kind of burst this whole thing open was published. One late evening, I woke up to loud knocks on the front door of my house. My husband was fast asleep, and I didn't want to go down and open the door. It wasn't normal for us to have late-night visitors, so I did wonder if it was an accident of some type. I looked out the window, and I couldn't see anything. It was pitch black outside. I woke my husband and asked him to go down and find out what was happening. He wasn't very happy, but got up, put his robe on, and went downstairs. I watched on the landing as he opened the door. 2 children were standing there. Both looked young, and both looked like they were frozen. I know there was a boy and a girl. My husband asked them if there had been an accident. They nodded. He asked them if their parents were with them. They shook their heads. "Our parents are coming for us," one of them said. My husband was still half asleep and started closing the door. "Let us in," one of them said. "Let us in." I watched as my husband opened the door and they walked in. He was obviously not in control of his own body. He doesn't take orders, but he did that night. I could see that both the children looked like they were 8 years old. I went downstairs and asked them if they would like to sit down. We went through to the kitchen and they sat. Our dog went crazy. I just shut him in another room. He would not stop barking. Looking back now, he knew what these kids were. I tried to make small talk with the kids. They didn't say anything. My husband said nothing. It was then that he started to complain about stomach pains. He said that he felt as though he had been struck with a sword. I tried to help him. The kids didn't move. I left the room, and when I came back, my husband had passed out and the kids couldn't be found. I called 911 and asked for an ambulance. I didn't even think about the kids until the next day. My husband was taken to hospital and needed to have immediate surgery to remove his appendix. The doctor said that he had a rumbling appendix and would have died if he had ignored it. The thing is, he had never had any issue with his appendix before that night. Who were those kids? Why did they want to hurt us? I know that they caused my husband's issues, and I want to know why.
Or did they save his life?
But he had never had appendix issues before.
That he knows of.
Well, okay, hold that opinion, and let me tell you the next story.
Okay.
Let me start by saying that I know how hard this will all be to believe. But now that things have taken a turn for the worse, I started looking for stories similar to mine, and I found Weak and Weird, which I will put this episode or the website in the show notes. I feel like I should share this story with someone, and your website seems like the right place. I made the mistake of letting the black-eyed kids inside, and now I'm worried that I might die because of it. I hope this will be a warning to everyone who is ever in the position to make the same mistake that I did. I live outside of a rural town in Vermont. It's a tight-knit community where everyone knows one another and people don't lock their doors at night. There has never been any need to. A little over a year ago, I woke up because I heard a loud banging on my front door. At the time, my husband lived in a small home in a dirt road just off the rural route into town. It was the middle of a snowstorm and the nearby hills get very slippery in the snow, so I thought that someone might have been in an accident and broken down. It's happened
some
before.
Children in the corn shed. Just saying. Just saying. Oh, small town, very rural. Lots of it. Nope. Mm-mm. If there's corn, run. If there's corn around you, run away.
If you're in Vermont, leave.
If you're in Ohio, leave. If you're in, I don't know, other places that have corn. Corn places.
If you're in Texas, definitely leave.
Yes. Just leave anyway, regardless.
I'm a head out.
If you see corn or not, if you're in Texas, please run away immediately.
Blinking twice.
Okay.
When I looked out the window, I could see that the motion spotlight was on. I could see that there were footprints in the snow that had come from our road and into our driveway, but there was no car anywhere. The snow was still covering the road, and no one had driven on it for at least a couple hours. Our front porch was obscured from the window, but I could see that someone was standing there. I wasn't sure what to think, so I woke my husband up just to feel safer. While I was telling him what was going on, the banging on the door started again, and my husband went to answer it while I stood in the hallway. When he opened the door, there were two children standing there in the snow, looking toward the ground. There was a boy and a girl, and they could not have been more than 8 years old. They were dressed strangely and had odd haircuts. The girl's hair was very long and straight, and the boy had a dated haircut that looked almost like a bowl cut. They weren't dressed for winter, and my first thought was that they must have been Mennonite children, but as far as I knew, there was never a large community of Mennonites around us. Thinking back on it, I know that my normal reaction to seeing children in a snowstorm would have been to rush them inside and bundle them up with blankets and hot cocoa. But that's not how this felt. These children were very unnerving. They would not make eye contact, and when my husband asked if everything was okay, they asked if they could come in. My husband looked at me like, "What do I do?" and asked the kids where their parents were. "They'll be here soon," is all they said. It was around 2:00 in the morning at this point, so the only reasonable thought in my head was that there must have been an accident or these kids got lost. As much as my instincts told me not to bring them inside, I did so anyway. I went into the kitchen to make them some hot cocoa while my husband took them into the living room. While I was fixing the kettle, I could hear my husband talking to the kids. He was asking them if they were okay, where they came from, how far they'd walked, if their parents' car was broken down, things like that. But they always answered, "Our parents will be here soon." They spoke in a sing-songy voice. They weren't afraid to be in a stranger's home at all. I started to notice that our cats, we had 4, were all hiding except Pigeon, who's in the kitchen with me. Normally our cats are very curious and friendly, and we have to be careful that they don't run out the door when we leave. This time, none of them even tried to see who was here, which I thought was very strange. All the hair on Pigeon's neck was standing up, and his tail was puffed up while he was in the living room. When I bent down to pet him and see what was wrong, he hissed and started growling and backed up until he had hid himself under the kitchen island. I have never seen him do that before.
I feel like you should always listen to your animals.
And that's something that you see in these stories is animals always react badly to these kids.
Also, like, is it the black eyes or is it the bowl cut? Because speaking from experience, in 1995, I too was a survivor of the bowl cut pandemic of 1995.
I had a
1987, bringing it back.
I had a mullet in 1998, so. I get it.
So what you're saying is hot girl summer.
Hot girl summer.
All around.
When I walked back into the living room, the kids were sitting on the couch as still as can be, but my husband was holding his head in his hands. I asked him what was wrong, and he just said that he felt very dizzy all of a sudden, but he was fine. I turned back to the children to give them their cocoa, but when they looked at me, I gasped. It took everything inside of me not to drop the mugs and run away. When they looked at me, their eyes were completely black. They had no whites, just giant black pupils. When they saw that I was scared, they stood up and asked if they could use the bathroom. I tried to be as composed as I could and showed them down the hall. They went to the bathroom together, and I hurried back to my husband to ask him if he had seen their eyes. He had seen them too, and he said that it looked like his brother's badly bruised eyes after a car accident. We were in the middle of talking about whose children they could be when my husband's nose started to bleed. He'd never had nosebleeds as long as I had known him. I just knew inside myself that this had something to do with the kids in the bathroom, and I started crying while I ran to get my husband some tissues. That's when the power went out.
Yep.
I heard my husband yell my name from the living room, and as I started to walk back through the hallway, I stopped dead in my tracks. The two children were standing at the end of the hallway. They weren't moving, and I've never been so scared in my whole life. They just stood there in the dark. After what felt like forever, the boy said, "Our parents are here." And they walked to the door, opened it, and walked out, leaving it wide open. My husband jumped up to go close it and almost fell over. We looked out the window and saw two men standing by a black cart idling at the end of our driveway. The men looked like they were wearing black-colored suits and were very tall, at least 6 foot. When my husband waved at them, they just stared at us, got into the car, and drove off. Our power came on about a half an hour later, but nothing was the same after that. Over the next few months, 3 of our cats went missing. We can only assume that they ran away somewhere and never came back, but the worst thing was coming home to find Pigeon in a puddle of blood in the living room floor.
Pigeon!
No. He looked like he'd been vomiting blood.
Baby.
The vet told us that he had some kind of hemorrhage. After my husband's nosebleeds became a regular occurrence, we went to see the doctor. He didn't know what to make of it other than dry nasal passages, but my husband was diagnosed with an aggressive skin cancer. When the doctor asked us if he had used tanning beds, we both thought he was joking, but apparently this kind of melanoma is linked to overuse of indoor tanning. The doctors think he will recover, but don't understand how it got bad so quickly. My husband has never worked an outdoor job and spends relatively little time in the sun. Since we let the black-eyed kids inside our home, I've also suffered from regular dizzy spells and nosebleeds on a regular basis. I've had other issues which I won't mention here, but trust me when I say that I'm suddenly in the worst condition of my life and no one can do anything about it. I know that all of this is because I let the black-eyed children in my home. We told everyone we could about the strange kids that showed up that night, but no one else saw them, and some laugh at how scared we were of the Mennonite kids, but we know what we saw. I wish my husband had never opened the door. Feel free to publish this as a warning to others about the black-eyed kids. My advice would be to lock your doors, call the police, wait for warning. Don't make the same mistake that I did. And that is my story about the black-eyed children.
Randy, I hate it.
Creepy.
It's just that slow knock.
Hate it. Although, you know what that knock reminds me of?
What?
Is Tamara home?
Do you guys remember that story from way back in the day? There were, it was like 2 teenage kids and they're super excited about going to like a sock hop or something. I assume it was a sock hop and or other school related dance. And he goes to pick her up and then their car breaks down.
Okay.
Right after they've heard a news story that some sort of escaped killer was on the loose.
Okay.
Typically, you know, there's like a guy with a hook or something.
This is like the frequency bias. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So car breaks down and this is before the age of cell phones. So the guy goes, you know what? It's only like a mile and a half over to, you know, the next gas station or something. I'll just walk and I'll call and I'll get help. So the girl stays in the car. She's really nervous, still listening to the thing because, you know, the killer's on the loose. And she's covered herself with a blanket because she's nervous and she hears like a knock on the car. And at first she's like, oh, it's going to be my boyfriend. And so it's just and she's about to go up, but then she just hears, and so she is freaking out. She thinks it's probably the psycho killer on the loose, and that is like banging all crazy trying to get into the car. So she's screaming under the blanket, and then suddenly the blanket gets ripped off of her, and it's a police officer, and he's like, hey, hey, are you okay? Like, we need to get you out of here. And she's like, no, like, where's my boyfriend? And he's like, look, I just need you to come with me. Like, it's going to be okay. He puts a blanket around her and starts taking her off. She's like, no, like, where's my boyfriend? What's going on? And then she looks back and she sees her boyfriend hanging from a noose from a tree so he's dangling over the car. And she sees as the wind picks up that as his body starts moving, his foot hits the car going,
it's him thudding the car. Oh,
that is so dark.
You guys don't remember that story?
No. So the way I heard it was a little bit different. The way I heard was it was like very similar. There's like the couple on Makeout Lane and they're doing their thing, and then they hear a knock and it's a serial killer, and then the boyfriend goes off to investigate. But she hears like, let's see if I could do it. Like she hears like scratching, and she freaks out and she leaves. And she like, I don't know where he's at. And so she gets in the car, like driver's seat, and she takes off. And what had happened was the killer had hung the boyfriend where his feet were like just barely touching, like holding onto the car roof. And he was still alive. And then she takes off and like essentially he hangs because like, well, not because she left, but because somebody like strung him up like that. But they're so
No, I loved the story. Like that one of my friends told me when I was in elementary school at a sleepover, and I was like, no, like I hated it so much.
Well, I love stories like that because they take something that is so basic and just so run of the mill and make it like knocking. Like you can make knocking so creepy.
But when you were talking about the Black Eyed Kids knocks, I immediately thought of that story because it was like just you're like, okay, it starts out normal and this isn't normal anymore and I don't like it and I really wanted to stop and I won't stop.
Well, just think about how nobody comes to my house unannounced. I mean, I'm tracking my Amazon delivery drivers, I'm tracking my DoorDash, I know my friends are. So somebody knocking unexpectedly is just so jarring now. It's like, what do you?
It's not okay.
What do you want?
Now, no.
What do you want?
Yeah, like see, like for the 90s, the 80s, like that was normal. Like your phone would ring on the wall, your door would knock, and it was like, well, who's there? And you went and answered it. Like that was completely acceptable. And nowadays, it's the polar opposite. Like you do not answer your door. You don't even answer your phone. You're skeptical. You're like, the phone is ringing. You know who it is, and you're still like, do I answer it? I don't know. Like
if somebody calls you, like, who died?
Why are you calling me?
What your name is?
First of all.
What your name is?
Well, but can you imagine?
Are you okay and are you in a ditch?
Like, although what cracks me up is like now, so Andrea, not this one, but other one, every time I have called her for the last however many years, she's was like, what's wrong? And I'm like, still nothing. Still just me being like, hey, what's up? Fine. Still fine. Everything's fine. She's like,
I mean, if you call me outside of like normal business hours, I'm just like, who died? If anybody calls me like before noon on a weekend or after like 9 p.m. on a weekday, I'm just like,
all I know is that this is what's going to keep us safe from the Black Eyed Kids is because we are not going to answer the door. No thanks. Nope. 4:30 in the morning. 4:30 in the morning, somebody knocking on your door? Absolutely not.
3 a.m.
Like, absolutely not.
One of the other, I didn't cover the story, but one of the other podcasts that I listened to covered where he was just like, this guy was just like, get off my porch, and he went and got a gun. And like, we can't believe you'd get a gun against kids. And I'm like, nah, bro. There is no, if you're knocking on my door,
there's no reason.
10 p.m. and 5 a.m. there is no restrictions. Like, I'm not saying I'm going to shoot a kid, but I'm going to just be like, I'm going to have this right here just to make sense with the So Sonny's gonna have her fork.
I'm gonna have my fork. I'm gonna be like, hey, yeah.
I feel like AJ is gonna be like,
I'm just gonna come in with my teacher voice and be like, sit down,
sir or madam.
Sir,
sit down. You should be ashamed of yourself.
I was gonna say, I was picturing AJ just like in the corner like Gollum while Petrie is like getting the door, but now I picture the exact opposite where he's like hiding behind you and you're just like, and I said, and also like I'm sitting down.
Shut out! Yo, I've had 60 freshmen in one classroom for 10 days.
Nope.
Come at me.
You're like, you disrupted my sleep. I have to be awake in 3 hours.
I am wrangling one 7-year-old. That's where I'm at right now.
60 freshmen.
I left a 7-ounce bird in my garage because I forgot about her. So
we're winning right here. This is the winner's circle.
But I like how Randi, the way that she is talking about the weight is the way that people talk about their kids, where they're like, they're 117 months old, and she's like, she's 7 ounces.
She's a very small burb. She is tiny.
Little
burp.
Okay, well, hopefully we've given our listeners enough of a palate cleanser.
We're so glad to be back.
We are stoked, and it is Halloween season.
Spooky season.
We've got some amazing things planned and coming up, and we are just thrilled to be back together.
Next episode, we'll go into why we had a huge hiatus. I plan on doing it this episode, and then I was just so excited about Black Eyed Kids that I forgot.
And we likely will have a couple European related spooky incidents / crimes coming up too.
Mm-hmm.
So excited. Oh, Europe is a hotbed for ghosty, spooky things.
Stand by.
Lots of great accents coming up. Many. So many.
Well, thank you guys for listening. I'm Randi.
Thank you. I'm AJ.
I'm Sunny.
And this has been Bourbon, Wine, and True Crime, and we will see you guys next week. Bye.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye.